I would say that the artist who defines this year so far is Post Malone. He's had 2 number ones, including one with Taylor Swift. He's had a song with Beyonce. And now he's got a new album that just came out. It is another pivot. It's a country album. Today on the show, Post Malone's big moment. I'm Alamin Abdul Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Listen, this is a day where we talk about the big pop culture stories that are out there right now. This week, it's a big music chat. For one thing, Taylor Swift is resuming her Eras tour after that scare in Vienna. We'll get to that in a moment. But we gotta start with Post Malone. New album, big year for Posty. A lot to get into. Niko Stratis is here. Rosie Long Decter is here. Rollie Pemberton is here. Niko and Rosie and Rollie. Guys, happy Post Malone Day to all of you.
Same to you.
Oh, that's so nice. Much. Thank you. I accept that graciously. Okay, listen. We got to acknowledge, I think, that Post Malone started out making music that sounded like this.
Watch out, oh, watch out, oh, watch out, yeah. I smash out, I smash out, I smash out, yeah. I'm spending on my pay.
Now he's making music that sounds like this.
Why'd you throw them stones at you? Had a wild hell on too. Living in your big glass house with the view. I thought you knew I had some help. It ain't like I...
That's Post Malone. That song is called I Had Some Help. It features a little help from Morgan Wallen. That song, by the way, is the longest running #1 song of this current year of 2024. As you can hear there, Post Malone, the guy who got famous as the rapper with the face tattoos and the cornrows and the grill, he's reinvented himself yet again, this time as a country artist. He's got this new album. It's called F1 Trillion that just dropped. You have some really big Nashville names on this thing. We got Dolly. We got Blake Shelton. We got Lainey Wilson. We got Brad Paisley. We got Luke Combs. So far as we can tell, the pivot to country seems to be working for Post Malone. That song that we just heard has got more than 500 million plays on Spotify. Rosie, it's kind of nuts to think that like coming into 2024, Post Malone was on a bit of a downturn. He was probably like the least popular he's been in a minute. How has he been able to kind of bring himself back to the center of pop music again?
Yeah, from my perspective, he had 2 albums that didn't connect the way he wanted them to, which, by the way, still means like hitting #2 on the charts. It's not.
Yeah, it's fine.
You're fine. You're fine. And I think even in that kind of moment, he's still A-list. He's still a superstar, partly just because everyone in the industry seems to really like him. People want to work with him. His fans want him to do well. He's got the charisma. He's very affable. And, he was, tapped to feature on these songs this year for Taylor Swift and Beyonce. He did a song last year with Noah Kahan. And he also performed at the Country Music Awards last year. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of been building up to this moment. He's been laying the groundwork. And I don't think his star really dimmed. I think he's been doing just fine and setting up this moment pretty well.
Yeah, Niko, I got to say, just on the thing that Rosie just said about the idea of Post Malone having charisma and everyone seeming to like him. Joe Coscarelli of the New York Times, shout out Joe, he did this profile of Post that came out last week. And I swear to God, every other person that isn't Post Malone that Joe talked to was like, yeah, Post Malone, really great hang. It's just like remarkable how everyone seems to be in agreement, like, Post Malone, what a fun guy to hang out with. But he's more than just a fun guy to hang out with. He's now also a country music artist. What do you make of the pivot to country music?
It feels very in line with an artist who feels very like amorphous. Like he doesn't he sort of moved into a bunch of different genres after sort of breaking out as a rap artist, and then was like, there was a couple years ago where he did a bunch of Nirvana covers with Travis Barker, and it's just like he is able to sort of move across all these lines and live as all these different genres, partially just because he's the white guy that makes music, and that's just a thing you get to do, and nobody really questions it, right? Yeah. And it seems like he wants to do this. This is a thing that he has said before, that when he turns 30, he wants to make a country or folk record. So it sort of feels like this was a thing he was building to. It also kind of feels a little dishonest, in a way. There's there's part of it that I don't buy. It feels a little not crass necessarily, but it's just like, this is a product. I'm hearing a product. This is maybe the most, this is a product he has ever felt, which is funny for an album called F1 Trillion, which is named after which is like a fake version of a Ford truck.
Yeah.
It just feels like, right, here we are at every Super Bowl commercial turned into an 18-song album.
I have to say, I've listened to this album. This album came out at midnight, and it has now gone triple platinum in my car. And so I have to slightly disagree with you in terms of it feeling like a product, because to me it feels organic, Rollie. It feels like there's something organic to Post Malone and country music. Like, they don't feel like strangers, probably because he's from the South. He's from Dallas, you know? But he did start off in other genres. He's not the only rapper to make a pivot to a bunch of other genres. You know, like Andre 3000 put out a flute record this calendar year. Does something feel different to you about Post Malone's sort of amorphous genre shift, do you think?
Well, unfortunately, in hip hop culture, I've seen this movie before.
Go on.
Frankly, you know, we call it a culture vulture.
Okay.
That's what I would call this.
Yeah.
This is an example of somebody, you know, he comes into the game, he's like, oh, I've got the cornrows, I got grills, I'm making all this music with these Atlanta hip hop producers. Yeah. And then suddenly he turns around and he's like, oh, I actually make country. I never really liked that rap stuff anyway. You know, it's the same thing with Miley Cyrus when that happened. That was very frustrating.
She made bangers,
right, and made bangers, and then now you see her in like accepting awards and stuff, and it's like, oh, that was just a weird period in my life.
Yeah.
And this is a thing we've seen time and time again. And, you know, think about Kendrick Lamar. You know, they not like us. That's what we mean.
Hey, Rollie, can I just push you a little bit on that, because you're a hip hop artist who makes music in other genres all the time. How is that different, you think?
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't use these genres as a costume. Ooh. You know, I make maybe I make an 80s new wave inspired album, but you know, I'm not wearing like a skinny tie and like dressing like I'm Gary Newman or something, you know? And that's the thing about this is white artists are able to put on the costume in a way that black artists aren't.
I buy that argument. But like, to me, what's different about this, Rosie? Well, I don't know, first of all, who hired me to be Post Malone's defense attorney. He doesn't need one. He's fine. This album will probably go to number one. But there's something to me that's a little bit different about Post, who's been trying on a bunch of different genres over the years, as Niko mentioned. Like, sure, he started off in hip hop. He sort of transitioned slightly to R&B for a little while. He did the rock thing. He had like a Pearl Jam collaboration moment, you know, had an Ozzy Osbourne collaboration moment. He is someone who is kind of naturally just kind of like genre fluid. He sort of like moves across these lines pretty well. Rosie, when you sort of like look at this record and the decision to introduce it with all these like Nashville cosigns, if you will, he comes on board, you know, with a single with Morgan Wallen. That's the first one that comes out. But also, like, you got the Brad Paisleys and you got the Luke Combses and you got the, you know, the Blake Sheltons on this record. He feels like he's trying to say, no, this is a bit organic to me. Look at all the people I'm willing to bring on board. Is that how you read all these features on this record?
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like he's maybe, you know, protesting a little too much. Of like, he's got so many Nashville legends on there that it's like, okay, we get it, you belong, you know. And I think that I do believe that it is like a genuine desire from him to make a record like this, and I think that like multiple things can be true, you know, like I think he can genuinely love country music, and it can still be really easy for a artist like him, a white male artist, to make that pivot from hip hop into country. And it sits a little uneasy with me also just in this kind of broader moment where hip hop has been this like dominant pop culture genre for decades. It feels like maybe there's a shift happening. Maybe not that country's going to unseat it necessarily, but country is like the hot genre of the moment. And it's got this long history in its establishment of, you know, institutional racism. There's a giant gender gap in country if you look at the charts. And I think, you know, and there's also kind of like this moment that was happening last year where with Jason Aldean's Try That in a Small Town, where there's kind of a space in country as a genre to kind of foster those culture war moments. And I think not that Post is responsible for any of that, but all of that sits underneath this pivot, I think. And I think there's tension there.
I'm interested in some of the names that he's enlisted for this because, you know, like you sort of see Post as almost trying to do like a dirtbag reclamation project with this album. You know, like the people that he's got on this. Sorry, Niko, I did say it, dirtbag reclamation. But he got folks like Jelly Roll on this record. He's got folks like Morgan Wallen on this record. People who sort of like have embodied that aesthetic very comfortably and very publicly embodied that aesthetic. Rosie, are you surprised that like Morgan Wallen, out of all people, with his sort of somewhat controversial past, out of all people, was featured on the first single, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I think that song slaps. I think it's got a great guitar hook.
Big
it's
tune.
Really,
big tune. Yes.
High energy. Listen, It's a good track.
Yeah.
Morgan Wallen makes hits. But he's, you know, someone where there is good reason to be skeptical. And I think it's another kind of example of these sort of men who maybe move very easily through spaces that other people can't move easily through.
Yeah.
And I think with that as like the first single, Post was kind of setting up this like dudes rock country moment. And you know what? He's having fun. Good for him. But again, it kind of just makes me think about that real gender gap. There's a gender gap on the album where there's, I think, 3 sort of women featured and then like lots and lots of boys. And he's having fun, but I still think it's like, there's fair reason to be skeptical, even as genuine as it might be from him, you know, as affable as he is. I think he sits in the broader context of the industry, you know?
Rollie, we got to talk about it because Morgan Wallen is also someone who comes loaded with a history, right? But mainly that, like, he is someone who's made these hits. He's someone who has gone to #1 repeatedly. He's the most selling artist of a couple years ago. But also he's someone who got mega famous because of a video that went viral of him drunkenly saying the N-word. What do you make of his inclusion on this record?
Yeah, you know, he has his controversy, but you know, ironically, I think Morgan Wallen's maybe a bit more hip hop than Post is these days. He's got the songs with Lil Durk and stuff. Like he did his mea culpa about what he said.
Yeah.
I actually really like Last Night by Morgan Wallen. I think that is like one of the best songs of the last few years. Low key, it went platinum in my AirPods. But yeah, I don't think it's a hot artist. The song is huge. You know, I feel like I give Post a pass on that.
Are we giving Post a pass also on the length of the album, Niko? Because it is 18 songs. It certainly did not need to be 18 songs. You don't hear this album go, every song is absolutely necessary on here. What do you make of it?
Yeah, this is the byproduct of somebody who has nobody in their life that says no to them ever. There's definitely some areas I would trim. It's sort of like the length of it sort of feels like, oh, this is a one-off, and you wanted to get as much out of it as you could.
Yeah.
There's some songs in there I really like. I really liked the song with Brad Paisley, which kind of surprised me.
Yeah.
I was sad to see my boy Dwight Yoakam not appear on this record, considering that Dwight and Post Malone have sort of had like they've appeared together. They've had like a public friendship, and like, oh, you don't get Dwight? I mean, I get it. It's a Nashville record, and Dwight Yoakam famously never popular in Nashville.
Yeah.
But, like I kind of wish this would have been tighter and more constrained. It kind of gets a little bit too freewheeling, and that's where the wheels kind of start to fall off the F1 trillion a little bit of like, oh, okay, this is just like, we're doing it, we're hitting it, and then we're out. And then like 2 years from now, we're all going to be talking about like, oh, I can't believe that he made, a sea shanty record or whatever Post Malone's going to do next. Because it just sort of feels like we're constantly on a train stopping at genres, and he's going to try them out, make $1 million, then we're just going to go to the next popular spot. Like,
okay.
I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I want to be proven wrong, but I'm waiting to be proven right again and again.
I hope you're right. I hope we do get the sea shanty album.
I mean, I kind of do too. He kind of looks like a guy that would have some sick sea shanties like in his back pocket.
Quite interesting.
Yeah.
I can't tell if that's a burn or a compliment. I genuinely can. It's a compliment. It's a compliment. Okay, I am on board with the Post Malone sea shanty record. Before we move on from this topic, I just want to say 2 songs of this record that really stuck out for me. The Lainey Wilson joint is really, really good, and the Sierra Farrell song is really, really good. Okay, we got to leave it there on Post Malone. My name is Alamin Abdul Mahmoud, and you're listening to Commotion. Niko Stratis is here. Rosie Long Decter is here. Rollie Pemberton is here. We've been talking about Post Malone's new album, which leads us naturally to our next topic.
DeLorean, buy the car you want, but it won't start up.
That is also a number one song for Post Malone. That is Taylor Swift with the song Fortnite featuring Post Malone. Look, last week, Taylor had to cancel 3 dates on her Eras tour in Vienna after authorities warned of an alleged attack plot. The tour has resumed. Taylor is playing 5 dates in London's Wembley Stadium. The vibe is a little different, to say the least. There's more security. Wembley has barred what's been called tailgating, which is a word that I love to say. It's where thousands of fans who don't have tickets to the show kind of still congregate outside the venue just to sort of be a part of the vibe. It's happened in nearly every city that she's gone to. But sometimes you get crowds as big outside the venue as you do inside the venue. Like last month in Munich, these videos went viral of like 40,000 fans on this hill right outside the stadium, a stadium that fits 50,000 people. Like that's just incredible to me. Rosie, what do you make of the changes to the Eras tour?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit like these are the risks of, putting on a giant event like the Eras Tour. I think that's part of what's made it such a feat is that it has been this huge traveling production that's gone, from city to city. It's not the first incident we've seen on the tour. There was a fan who died from heat exhaustion in Rio, which was a very different situation. But I think like the connector is just that these are the huge risks that are being taken. And I think event producers have to do what they have to do to keep things safe, to keep people safe. I'm glad no one was hurt, but it does sort of leave me with a feeling sometimes of like, are these giant events worth it? Even looking at summer music festivals, especially as the planet gets hotter, there's going to be more and more heat problems. There's problems with shade. For me, I'm kind of like, maybe I'll go see my local band for $20 at the bar instead, I think there's something to be said about the kind of like massive risks that come with events like this.
I sort of believe 2 things at once, Niko. One is that like a stadium is not a place to see a show, and 2, that maybe Taylor Swift is one of like 4 artists who are built to do a show in a stadium, which is to say that like she's somehow capable of transforming a stadium into a relatively small space. Like she's had this like long-standing, very intimate connection with her fans, and part of that is a vibe that is created on these tours. How do you see these security precautions impacting that relationship that she does have with her fans?
Before this moment, I never considered the idea of tailgating outside a Taylor Swift concert.
It's pronounced tailgating, thank you.
I apologize to the tailgating community for misspeaking. Don't come for me.
Tailor-gating was right there.
Yeah, Taylor-gate. Taylor-gate does sound like a nice thing we would have to get some investigative journalists on.
Sorry, continue.
It does it is this big environment, right? Like you say, these are massive shows, and we're seeing this more and more. And there is this connection to the audience that is somewhat created by the audience, right? Like we always talk about like, oh, Taylor has this connection with her fans. Like, well, the fans have a connection with her. She's never really spoken to them in a direct way. There's a lot of inference there. And they really make these environments. I understand that these things are super important to Taylor Swift fans. I'm famously Taylor agnostic. I would never do this, mostly because I don't like to leave the house. But also it's just like, these things are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. This Eras tour is lasting for literal eras. And these things are they are the biggest cultural moments. And how are we protecting people? Talking about Rio as a prime example, how are people that are in these environments actually cared for and looked after? And I think these are important questions to ask as these tours get bigger and longer and more expensive. Where is the money being spent? What are the security? What is the risk? How are we keeping the people that make this environment, this connective, this community? Those are the people that are standing outside in the heat or whatever. Those are the people that make that community. So what are we doing to make sure that they're safe and looked after? And I think, maybe we're asking that question after the fact, but it's a good thing that it's being asked. And I hope it's a thing that gets considered more and more. And also maybe we scale down the scope of a lot of tours. We saw this when the Black Keys had to cancel their tour because they were booked on stadiums. Maybe we actually do try to scale these things down, make them more manageable, make them safer somehow.
Yeah, that's the counter feeling, right? The counter feeling of the idea of fitting 70,000 people in one stadium. Of course, you're going to have those security risks, and of course, you're going to sort of affect the experience that you have of the show. Rollie, what are you thinking about as you see what's happening at Wembley Stadium this week? No tailgating.
Yeah, it's horrible. These kind of incidents at live events that have been happening, like the Ariana Grande situation.
Yeah, attack in Manchester.
Yeah, and you need to secure things as much as you can. But the first thing that I think actually with this situation is, can you imagine a rapper being allowed to have a big tailgate party outside of the stadium? Can you imagine like Playboy Cardi tailgating? It would be shut down so fast.
That's called playgating, I believe. Yes.
Right?
100% it would be. You're totally right. There's a completely different kind of set of rules for an artist like Taylor Swift.
Yeah, and I feel like now that these kind of attacks and things that are happening at these big pop shows, I think they need to be treated with the same level of security that your average rap show at a club is.
Yeah.
The kind of metal detectors and pat downs I get going to a show at like History is way, way beyond what you would see at maybe a Taylor Swift show. So.
All right, so I got to move on to another topic, and that is, well, let's do another Taylor Swift track to take us into this topic.
So I keep my head up, my bread up, I won't let up. Never. Promise that you'll never endeavor with none lesser. Ever, ever. I be dragging that wagon. Karma is a beauty, winning that pageant. It's karma is my boyfriend.
I debated doing the grah that Ice Spice did. I suppose I just did. I wasn't planning to. That is Taylor Swift, Karma, featuring her new BFF, Ice Spice. Look, the rapper's latest tour is generating a lot of headlines because if you went to the show, you would have heard this.
You know the butcher? The freaking nut job that goes around chopping people up? The feds heard that he's gonna be here today. So they set up a trap for him. This whole concert, it's a trap.
Imagine you're at a concert and you're waiting to see the headliner, and then they just start rolling the trailer for M. Night Shyamalan's Trap. Not a good movie, by the way. That is just like one of a handful of commercials that are screening on a loop on the main stage screen as you wait for Ice Spice to take the stage. I know we're used to seeing ads in every venue we go to, but there's something that feels kind of dystopian about this and a little bit different. So I'm just going to go around the table real quick about your thoughts about commercials like this, the future live concerts. Rosie, what's your reaction to seeing commercials at Ice Spice's shows?
Yeah, I've been saying for a minute that I think we need to bring back selling out as a concept. This was this was a very big concept in the 90s, and then it kind of has fallen off. And I'm here for bringing it back. I think this is. I saw that this was posted on the Reddit forum for r/sad cringe.
Yeah.
So she is taking a bit of flack for this.
Yeah.
And I think this is not an Ice Spice problem, in my opinion. Like, I think this is an industry. This is, revealing some things about the economics of the industry right now. Artists got to eat. It's hard out there for artists for sure.
Yeah.
But I do think this is where, like, the sort of politics of cool are useful because, cool is about sort of like keeping art as something more than just a commodity, reminding ourselves that like maybe we don't want every single part of our cultural production to be totally subsumed by major corporations, totally existing just to kind of make increase the profit margins at any possible moment.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not a big deal that she's doing ads at concerts. No, but I just think you don't want this to become standard industry practice. There's a term by Cory Doctorow's term in shitification.
Yeah. This is exactly that.
It was coined to refer to platforms and the way platforms sort of work really well at first to bring users in. And then once they've got sort of a mass of users, they can get slowly worse.
Yeah. And
we don't want to see that happen in a live music setting, especially because like that's where you're actually connecting with your fans. The fans are connecting directly with the physical band, with the physical performer. You want to kind of keep a little bit of aura around that if you can.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay she's taking flack for this, but it's not on her. This is like revealing something broader in the industry. And I think we've seen a bit of a rethinking of the relationship between sort of art and brands and fans. We've seen a lot of activism around Palestine, sort of impressive sort of activism around divestment. And I think this is a moment where we can be sort of rethinking those relationships.
Okay, I got to leave it there. My name is Alamin Abdul Mahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Listen, before we go, can I just ask each of you for a very quick recommendation? Rollie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, my recommendation would be Love is Blind UK.
Go in. Let's go.
Yeah, I really like it because unlike the American version, all the people on there are like 39 years old and they're having really mature conversations, and I'm really vibing with it.
Okay, I love this. I love that you're vibing with it. Niko, what about you? What's your recommendation?
I've been really enjoying watching the show Sunny on Apple TV Plus. It's the Rashida Jones. It's like a black comedy. It's very sort of retro futuristic AI, the threats of AI and robots. It's fun. It's a weekly thing. Nobody knows how it ends. It's almost through. You have like now is like the perfect time to like watch it all and catch up because I think there's maybe like 3 episodes left. So watch that.
Can I just say I love an Apple TV Plus recommendation because I don't think we get enough of those here. Secretly, we've talked about it on the show.
Great shows on there.
The best streaming network. Nobody's talking about this. Well, we're now talking about this, which is a blessing. Rosie Long Decter, last word to you. What's your recommendation, friend?
Yeah, I think you should all check out the new singles from Vancouver R&B artist Jeanette King. She is bringing like Prince, early Madonna, 80s funk kind of vibes to the table. This Might Be It is an absolute banger, and she's got an album coming out this fall.
I'm on board. That sounds delightful. Okay, thank you to all of you. Thank you for being here. This has been a wonderful journey. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Anytime, of course. Rosie Long Decter is a writer for Billboard Canada and Maisonneuve in Montreal. Niko Stratis is a culture writer based in Toronto. And Rollie Pemberton is a rapper and writer also known as Cadence Weapon. He was in Hamilton. That is it for the podcast today. Look, while you're listening, make sure to give us a follow. Commotion was produced this week by Stuart Berman, Ty Callender, Ryan Chung, and Jane Van Couverden. Our digital producers are Carla Antonio, Amelia Ekbal, Shuli Grossman-Gray, and Shell Turingen. Our directors are Danielle Grogan and Ryan Chung. Ryan, thanks for holding it down, my dude. Our engineer is Sam Hashmi. Our senior producer is John Perry. Anne McKeegan is our executive producer. My name is Alamin Abdul Mahmoud, and I will see you on Monday.